They said he was dragged away at dawn, hands tied, eyes covered, hauled into a nameless armored truck somewhere near Ouagadougou. A voice shouted in French, "Take him to Abidjan." Then silence, no press conference, no proof of life. Just a blurry video and a continent thrown into panic. Was Captain Ibrahim Traoré really gone? Within hours, millions were chanting, "Or our free Traore." Markets closed, cities froze, mothers wept in the streets. If this was fake, it was the most dangerous lie in Africa's modern history. And if it was real, we'd already lost more than a man. Like, subscribe. This story will change you. If you believe that even the smallest nation can still stand tall against the might of global powers. If you believe that Africa deserves to write its own story in its own voice on its own terms. If you've ever seen the fire in Captain Ibrahim Traoré's eyes and felt it burn in your chest, then this story isn't just his, it's yours too. Like this video. Subscribe to this channel. Not just to support, but to stand beside us. Because we're not just watching history unfold, we're becoming part of it. What began as a whisper has now become a quiet storm, and it's only just begun. And so the panic began. The video had no timestamp, no watermark, just 30 seconds of chaos. A man hands bound with plastic cord face, bruised forced into the back of a military vehicle. The camera shook violently. In the background, a soldier's voice cried out, "Amenez-le à Abidjan," a phrase that sent shockwaves across the continent. People didn't wait for confirmation. They reacted fast. By the time the sun rose over Ouagadougou, the footage had gone viral. Some said it was real. Others swore it was staged. But the image, the red beret, the posture, the silence, it looked too much like him, Captain Ibrahim Traoré, the man who had become a symbol of defiance of sovereignty, of resistance against foreign domination, now seemingly reduced to a silent prisoner in the hands of enemies. The footage spread like wildfire. It jumped borders, crossed languages, crept into newsrooms. Within hours, the question was no longer, is it true? It was, what do we do now? And in the silence from official sources, fear filled the vacuum. People turned not to leaders but to whispers, telegram groups, and instinct. And instinct told them something terrible had happened. What followed was unlike anything the region had seen. In Ouagadougou, word spread faster than the morning call to prayer. Street vendors abandoned their stalls. Children stood frozen at school gates. Markets fell into eerie silence. Everywhere eyes were glued to phones, hands shaking mouths, half open with dread. A woman in Sector 30 cried out, clutching her toddler. "They've taken Captain Ibrahim Traoré. How are we meant to survive without him?" People didn't wait for proof. They poured into the streets looking for answers that no one could give. Rumors grew legs. Some said he was being tortured. Others swore he had already been executed. In Bamako, a taxi driver refused payment from passengers. "Keep it," he said, "we've got bigger problems now." Mosques, salons, tea shops, all whispered the same question. What did they do to Captain Traoré? By midday, city squares in Niamey, Conakry, and Bobo Dioulasso were packed. Not with protest signs or chants, just silent crowds waiting, hoping, dreading, and still no official word. No footage, no denial, nothing. In that void, fear became truth. And in that truth, something deeper began to stir, not just grief, but anger. Something was about to break. Then came the international reaction, swift, calculated, and louder than ever. Western news outlets pounced on the story. No verification, no hesitation, just headlines. Breaking: Traoré captured in secret coup. AES collapsing from within. Captain Ibrahim Traoré missing, crisis looms. CNN displayed satellite maps, drawing red circles around suspected detention sites in Côte d'Ivoire. France 24 recycled old footage of foreign workers being expelled from gold mines, framing it as racial hostility under Traoré's rule. No journalist could confirm the video's source. No government official gave a quote. But the lack of answers only deepened the narrative. Al Jazeera called it an unprecedented constitutional breakdown. BBC aired back-to-back panels speculating who might replace Captain Ibrahim Traoré. At that point, truth didn't matter. The story was out. The world had chosen its angle, and Traoré, once hailed by many as a new African icon, was now being painted as either a fallen revolutionary or a fugitive of his own making. Inside Africa, confusion boiled into fury. Outside, commentators feasted on the silence. And through it all, one question lingered in every newsroom and living room. Where is Captain Traoré? And then, just as the continent braced for the worst, everything changed. At exactly 7:00 p.m., the national broadcaster in Burkina Faso interrupted its evening programming. No warning, no build-up, just a live image. There he was, Captain Ibrahim Traoré, calm, unshaken, seated among tribal elders in Ouagadougou, his uniform crisp, his posture steady, his eyes unwavering. No wounds, no fear. The room fell silent. Across Africa, phones dropped. People stood still. In Conakry, a woman fainted in shock. In Niamey, a crowd burst into applause. Some cried, others stared in disbelief. Then he spoke. Just one sentence. I was never captured, but I now know exactly who wanted me to be. The message wasn't long, but it was nuclear. In that moment, relief turned to rage. Not just towards those who spread the lie, but toward the system that made it believable. The silence, the manipulation, the foreign headlines. All of it collapsed under the weight of his presence. Captain Ibrahim Traoré hadn't just returned. He had exposed something far bigger than a rumor, and now the people weren't just watching, they were awake and ready to fight back. But what the public didn't yet know, what no one outside a small circle inside AES command knew, was that the lie had been engineered. This wasn't a rumor gone wrong, it was a weapon, precise, programmed, and paid for. 3 days after Captain Ibrahim Traoré's reappearance, the AES Cyber Defense Unit held an emergency briefing in Niamey. The findings were clear. The video that shook the continent was a deep fake, built using artificial intelligence voice synthesis software and motion modeling. The soldier's voice shouting, "Take him to Abidjan," had been digitally stitched together from real French military radio intercepts. His face, though obscured, was mapped using footage from public speeches. Even the lighting in the video matched a specific timestamp of dawn in Ouagadougou, making it almost indistinguishable from reality. But that wasn't the most disturbing part. The original file had first been uploaded from a media firm based in the outskirts of Paris, a company that on paper produced commercial documentaries, but its servers had previously been flagged in disinformation operations targeting elections in Francophone Africa. This wasn't just technology, it was statecraft. Across the region, the timeline of digital activity told a horrifying story. Fake accounts, tens of thousands, had been activated within minutes of the upload. Many bore African names, but were registered in Europe. Pre-written captions, mass shares. Influencers paid in advance, posted condolence messages before the story even reached West African TV. Even verified news outlets didn't question the clip. They repeated it, amplified it, validated it. And what was the aim? Not to capture Captain Ibrahim Traoré, but to crush faith in him. To shake a movement that had begun to unsettle global power structures. To send a message to anyone, anywhere who dared challenge the old system. You may rise, but we can erase you without ever touching you. But that plan had failed. Instead of silence, it sparked defiance. Instead of division, it awakened solidarity. In response, Captain Ibrahim Traoré convened a joint press conference with AES leaders. Calm as ever, he addressed the cameras directly. They didn't need to arrest me. They only needed our people to believe I'd been taken. But what they didn't expect is that we no longer believe them. A week later, Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger announced the formation of the African Strategic Information Response Center, ASIRC, a continental task force to expose and neutralize external information warfare. Trained analysts, AI detection tools, real-time monitoring. It wasn't just a technical move, it was political. Africa would no longer be the silent victim of digital colonialism. And in the markets of Ouagadougou, an old man put it best. They tried to tie up Traoré with a machine, but they couldn't tie up our minds. What began as a rumor ended as a reckoning. For years, Africa had been the stage on which global powers played out their games. Resources were extracted, leaders bought or removed, and entire narratives were manufactured to shape global perception. But this was different. It wasn't a coup of guns or borders. It was a coup of the mind. A war not over territory but over truth. The fabricated capture of Captain Ibrahim Traoré revealed something far more dangerous than any one military threat: the power of belief. The idea that with one video, one whisper, one manipulated moment, an entire continent could be pushed into panic. But it also revealed something else, something Western strategists hadn't accounted for: resilience. Burkina Faso didn't crumble. The AES alliance didn't fracture. Instead, a new consciousness emerged, not of blind trust in institutions, but of shared responsibility for truth. The people who flooded the streets, the voices that rose in protest, weren't just defending one man. They were defending the very idea that Africa has the right to think, speak, and protect itself on its own terms. Captain Ibrahim Traoré's sentence, "I now know exactly who wanted me to be captured," rang louder than any gunfire. It wasn't just aimed at those who engineered the lie. It was a message to every external actor who still believes that African leadership can be destroyed with a script and a signal. What followed was not just political reform, but cultural awakening. Universities began offering workshops on media literacy. Community groups launched networks to verify stories before sharing them. Even religious leaders began preaching sermons about the need to guard not just borders but minds. The creation of ASERC wasn't just a bureaucratic step. It was a statement of intent. Africa would now play defense and offense in the information age. No longer would its people be pawns in foreign narratives. No longer would deepfakes dictate real pain. But the most powerful shift didn't happen in the corridors of power. It happened in the hearts of ordinary people, in mothers who whispered to their children that truth matters, in students who questioned what they read, in elders who nodded and said, "We won't fall for that again." The storm had passed, but the memory would remain. And as the sun rose over Ouagadougou a week later, something had changed. Not the skyline, not the government, but the people. They stood a little taller, spoke a little clearer, looked at their leaders and each other with new eyes, because when the world tried to break them with a lie, they answered with something stronger: awakening. Captain Ibrahim Traoré had not been taken, but the fear that once controlled the continent had, and it's not coming back. If you believe that even a small nation can still rise and stand tall against the world's greatest powers, if you believe that Africa deserves to tell its story, not in borrowed words, but in its own voice, on its own terms, if you saw the fire in Captain Ibrahim Traoré's eyes and felt it burn in your chest, then this story belongs to you too. This isn't just about one man. It's about the right to truth, the right to resist, the right to remember who we are even when they try to erase us. So like this video, subscribe to this channel, not just to support us, but to stand with us, because what began as whispers in the dark has become a silent storm, and it's sweeping across the continent. We're not just telling stories anymore. We're reclaiming them together. The story of Captain Ibrahim Traoré's alleged capture is not merely a tale of mistaken identity or media error. It is a powerful case study of how truth can be manipulated in the digital age and how entire nations can be brought to the brink through illusion. At its core, the incident teaches us about vulnerability, not of borders, but of minds. It reminds us that in a world where perception can be engineered, the greatest battle is no longer fought with guns, but with information. The most immediate lesson is about the fragility of trust in the digital era. One short unverified video, blurred, contextless, and anonymously uploaded, was enough to plunge a continent into confusion. Panic erupted not because of its clarity, but because of its plausibility. The deepfake was believable not because it was technically perfect, but because it exploited an existing atmosphere of geopolitical tension, foreign interference, and historical trauma. The people of Burkina Faso and the broader African region were already primed to fear the worst. That context gave the fake video power. Secondly, this incident exposes the danger of silence from institutions in times of crisis. For nearly 15 hours, there was no official response. No confirmation, no denial. And in that vacuum, fear became fact. In a world where information moves faster than governments can react, silence itself becomes a weapon. The delay in communication, even if meant to ensure accuracy, created space for manipulation to thrive. People do not wait for press conferences anymore. They look for signals, live appearances, social media updates, or the absence of them. In such a climate, public leadership is not only about policy, but about presence. Moreover, the story reveals the true sophistication of modern information warfare. This was not the work of amateurs. The video was tracked to a firm in Paris known for disinformation campaigns. Voice synthesis used real French military radio chatter. Influencers and bots were coordinated. Even mainstream media outlets, in their rush to break news, amplified the lie without question. This wasn't just a rumor gone viral. It was a coordinated multi-platform digital strike designed to destabilize a political movement. It shows how foreign actors can now wage silent wars against African states using keyboards and servers, not soldiers and tanks. A key takeaway here is the urgent need for digital sovereignty in Africa. The continent must invest not only in infrastructure, but in digital defense. The formation of ASIRC, the African Strategic Information Response Center, is a step in the right direction, but it must be more than symbolic. African governments need trained analysts, real-time monitoring systems, and public awareness campaigns. More importantly, they must build trust with their citizens through transparency and rapid communication. People will only reject lies if they feel they have access to the truth. Equally vital is the lesson on media literacy and civic responsibility. The speed at which the rumor spread revealed how little critical thinking is applied when emotions run high. The public, though victimized, must also bear responsibility. Each share, each retweet, each whispered repetition of an unverified claim adds fuel to the fire. Education systems must now treat digital literacy as a core skill, teaching students how to spot misinformation, question sources, and understand the consequences of spreading falsehoods. This is not just about protecting political stability. It is about safeguarding collective dignity. There is also a moral lesson about the power of leadership and symbolism. Captain Ibrahim Traoré's brief sentence on live television, "I was never captured, but I now know exactly who wanted me to be," had more impact than hours of technical rebuttals. It was sharp, calm, and perfectly delivered. In that moment, he did not just deny the rumor. He exposed the intent behind it. His composure in crisis reminded people why they trusted him in the first place. Leadership in such moments is not about explaining. It is about embodying strength, clarity, and truth. Another profound lesson is the awakening of collective consciousness. What started as panic turned into reflection, then into action. Communities began discussing not just who to blame, but how to prevent it from happening again. Civil society groups formed networks to verify news. Elders and educators encouraged younger generations to think before sharing. The trauma became a teacher, and from that teacher came resilience. This story also reaffirms the idea that narratives shape reality. If enough people believe a lie, it becomes real in its effects. The mass reaction to Traoré's capture, from economic paralysis to psychological despair, proved how perception can trigger political consequence. Whoever controls the narrative often controls the nation. Therefore, Africa must not only fight disinformation, it must also tell its own stories. Stories that are grounded in truth, complexity, and pride, not filtered through foreign headlines or colonial echoes. Perhaps the most beautiful lesson is found in the final words of an old man at the market. "They tried to tie up Traoré with a machine, but they couldn't tie up our minds." This simple sentence captures everything. The attack may have been digital, but the defense was human. People remembered who they were. They saw through the illusion, and once the illusion was broken, it lost all power. In the end, this was more than a lesson in crisis. It was a mirror held up to a continent, revealing its strengths, its blind spots, and its future. Africa is no longer just reacting to history. It is rewriting it. And as long as leaders remain honest, institutions stay transparent, and people stay vigilant, no algorithm, no deepfake, no foreign campaign will ever be strong enough to erase the will of a united people. The moment the broadcast aired and Captain Ibrahim Traoré appeared on screen, healthy and resolute, the internet erupted, not with confusion this time, but with vindication. In thousands of comments, people poured out their emotions, some in relief, others in fury. One viewer wrote, "I wept when I saw him alive. Not because I thought he had been taken, but because I realized how quickly we believed he had. That shows how much trust we've lost in the system and how vulnerable we are to fear." Many echoed that sentiment. This wasn't just about Traore. It was about all of us, another commenter explained. They knew how much we depend on symbols like him, so they targeted our hope. But what they didn't realize was that our hope is no longer tied to one man, it's tied to a whole movement. Some users were deeply introspective. One woman from Dakar admitted, "I forwarded the video without checking. I feel ashamed now. But I've learnt a lesson. From today, I will think twice before sharing anything." Disinformation isn't just something governments fight. It's something we must all be responsible for. A man from Niamey commented that it was the first time he had ever seen his father cry over a news broadcast. "When the deepfake came out, my father didn't eat all day. He kept saying, 'They've taken our son.' And when Traore appeared that night, my father stood up and saluted the screen." I'll never forget that moment. There was widespread condemnation of international media. France 24 should apologize publicly, one viewer declared. They jumped on a lie without fact-checking, and now they pretend nothing happened. That's not journalism, that's sabotage. Another added, "When will African stories stop being filtered through foreign interests? They report us like we're shadows in our own land." Others focused on the technical aspects of the attack. Tech-savvy viewers were quick to analyze the deepfake and voice synthesis. One digital media student commented, "This was a masterclass in psychological warfare, but it was also a lesson in how dangerous AI can be in the wrong hands. We need to regulate this before it becomes common practice to kill leaders digitally." Among the thousands of comments, one powerful theme emerged: awakening. This wasn't just a test of leadership, a commenter from Bamako wrote. It was a test of how easily we surrender our own thinking. The scary part wasn't the video, it was how quickly we lost our composure. Young people in particular expressed a renewed sense of duty. They thought we were too distracted, too fractured, too weak, one youth leader from Accra wrote. But we see now, we're wide awake, and we'll protect each other better next time. Another comment read, "I used to laugh at politics. Now I understand how serious it is. Traore isn't perfect, but he made me care again." Some praised the creation of ACERC. "Finally, we're fighting back on the digital front," a cybersecurity expert posted. Africa must control its narrative. This center should be in every country, not just Burkina Faso. The war has moved online, and we need soldiers with laptops, not just rifles. There was also deep gratitude, not just toward Captain Traore, but toward the people who kept hope alive. To the elders who didn't panic, to the mothers who prayed, to the youth who kept the streets calm, thank you. You held us together when we were about to break, someone wrote. One particularly viral comment stated, "They tried to take a man, but they ended up revealing a machine. And now, we know who's behind the curtain." It was shared across platforms, quoted in videos, and turned into a protest banner the following week. But not all comments were celebratory. Some were cautious. A viewer from Nairobi posted, "Yes, we won this round, but let's not be naive. If they tried this once, they'll try again. Maybe next time the lie will be even better and the silence even longer. We need to prepare." Others pointed to the deeper wounds exposed. This story reminded us how disconnected our governments are from the people, someone noted. 15 hours of silence is not acceptable. We don't just want heroes. We want systems that work and communicate. Still, a large number of voices focused on legacy and symbolism. One woman from Johannesburg wrote, Captain Ibrahim Traoré stood up that night and reminded us we are not alone, that our struggle is not forgotten. He didn't just refute a rumor, he reignited our faith. Another commenter summed it up simply, it's not about the man, it's about the message. And the message is this: Africa will not be erased. Diaspora Africans also joined the conversation. From London, a commenter posted, I watched it at 3 a.m., couldn't sleep. For the first time in years, I felt something real coming out of the continent. Not shame, not despair, but strength. Another added from Toronto, Traore is proof that we still have voices worth listening to. We just need to make sure those voices aren't silenced or replaced by simulations. Finally, there was a powerful mix of rage and resolve. Let them come with their deepfakes, their lies, their scripts, one voice thundered. We have something more powerful: memory. We remember who we are now, and no video can undo that. As the comment sections continued to flood with support, analysis, frustration, and reflection, one truth became clear: this story had changed people. It didn't just reveal an attack, it exposed a fault line, and it lit a fire that now burns in the minds of a generation who refuse to be manipulated again. They saw through the illusion, and they're not going back.